Good morning, everyone, from wherever you're watching from. Welcome to another exciting episode of Audacity with PS. My name is Joshua Moses, and I'm a lawyer. Let's get right into it. Welcome, like I said earlier, to another exciting episode of Audacity with PS. And before we go on, I'd like to take a moment to say a big thank you to my father in the faith, Pastor Shoma Okodewa, the apostle over this house, for this awesome opportunity to speak to you this morning. I mean, like the name of the program says, it's Audacity with PS. So this really is his platform, but he's been gracious enough to share this platform with me this morning, and I'm so grateful and I feel so honored for that. And thank you, sir. So we'll just dive right into it. The topic we're looking at today is called Your Business and the Law. Your Business and the Law. I know that is something that you probably did not see coming, on this program, but it's very important that we look at these dimensions of our endeavors as individuals, as people that are on a quest to change the world, to dominate, like one of our previous speakers had spoken on, from dream, if you remember, to domination. And my focus really this morning is I want to help you to understand how you can use the instrumentality of the law, right, to increase the value of your business, right? I'm speaking specifically this morning to small business owner, what you call MSMEs, right, micro, small, and medium-sized businesses. I also will be speaking to another category of people that we call the creatives, right? Here and there, I'm going to drop a few nuggets for career professionals, but the focus really will be on business owners and then the creatives. And essentially what we're looking at is how you can use the law to increase the value of your business, right? That might seem interesting to you at the moment, but when I get into it, you'd understand it. Right, so the first thing I would say, right, by way of introduction, is that there is a fundamental principle that business is run on, and it's called the principle of multiplication. I mean, you are in business to make money, right? However you want to slice the apple, that is the ultimate objective of being in business. And one thing that business helps you to do is that it helps you to multiply resources on a geometric scale, right? As opposed to, just adding numbers. You can multiply, and you should multiply, right? The challenge for many businesses, specifically small businesses, is that they don't understand how to grow from that mom and pop, right, to a business that is actually making a difference in its space, right, that empowers the person who is the business owner, and that equally makes a difference in the lives of the significant portion of the populace, right? And I believe that this is a mandate that God has given to us, as believers, right, to dominate in our different spheres. So it is my desire that that small business that you're doing right now will grow and will multiply and become, a major player, right, in this space. I'll tell you a few reasons why you should not remain small, right? Why you should deliberately fight that urge, right, that tendency to remain small as a business owner. So let's take, for instance, let's say that you run a sole proprietorship, which means you are the owner of your business. You are the only one employed in the business. I mean, you're self-employed, really. Right, and you, for instance, let's say you are a fashion designer, right? You have to agree with me that there's a limit to how much work you can take on as an individual, right? So at some point, you would have to hire people, and I'll begin to speak right now to structure, right? How you can structure your business, right? Pardon me, I'm not a business consultant, but by virtue of my interaction with businesses as a lawyer, right, I've come to see some critical issues, right, that are very important to business growth and development. And that's why I'm going to be wearing two hats this morning, right? One is that of a lawyer, and I'm going to be speaking strictly to the provisions of the law. And then the other is somewhat like, a business consultant, right? And I'm just going to share from there, right? And so back to what I was saying about structure, right? Why do you need to organize your business? Why do you need to structure your business, right? I'll tell you this fundamental truth. It is the fact that for you to multiply resources, you must be able to inject what I call life, right, into the assets that you have in your hands, right? Let's go back to the example of our fashion designer, right? And let's see how this fashion designer can inject life into that which they are doing, right? And now they can generate surplus value, right, from that. So again, you're one person, you're doing the sewing, you're doing the, the customer, the marketing yourself, customer service yourself, everything just revolves around you, right? First off, you need to understand that you are human, right? So your strength is limited. There's a limit to the number of jobs that you can take on, right? So this is why you will need to hire, other people, right, to help you with the business, right? And this would also lead me into what I call documentation, right? But I'll come to that in a bit. Let me focus first on structure, right? I've realized that one of the reasons why a lot of small businesses don't grow, right, is that they are not able to set up a structure that would engender growth, that would lead to growth, right? So first off, you limit your the revenue that you're able to generate from that business, because you're just one person and you can only do what one person can do, right? However strong-willed you are, right, your strength is limited, by the fact that you're just one person, right? So the first thing you want to do is you want to hire other people, to help with the business, right? But you also want to formalize that process, right? So when you're hiring, it is important that you have a contract, right? Have a contract, have an employment contract that details, the terms and conditions of that employment, right? Secondly, I think perhaps I should even backtrack a bit and speak to the registration of your business, right? So in Nigeria, for instance, you can either run your business as a private limited liability company, or a public company. But let's start with private companies, right? It doesn't cost anything for you to actually register your company. You can do that in give or take 1 week, right? Other things being equal, this is Nigeria, but other things being equal. But I mean, I'm speaking to a global audience, so in some other countries, it might even be less. I know that in some countries, you can even register a company within a few minutes, right? If you have all the required document, right? So that's the first, and that's the starting point. You register your business, right? I know that one major drawback for some people is the fact that, well, if I formalize my business, then I get into the formal sector, then I have to pay taxes and all of those things. And first, the law allows you to register a small company, which means that the formalities, around your business operations are not as much as when you have a big company, right? By definition, a small company is a company that has, I think, an annual turnover of not more than 120 million naira in Nigeria, and then your asset is not valued at above 60 million naira, right? And that is what the law regards as a small company, and you have all these advantages here and there. So one of the challenges that I find with a lot of small businesses, particularly with respect to the issue of registration or formalization, if you like, is the fact that businesses are not able to generate capital, right? You're not able to generate capital either by way of equity investment, right, or credits, right? And I mean, it's simple why that is, right? So if I want to invest in your company, for instance, you have a small business, but it is not registered, right, as a company. If it were registered as a company, right, you can give me equity in your business, right, which means I can give you surplus, I can give you additional capital, right, in exchange for the equity that you're giving to me. And it doesn't have to be anything, huge, and I know that's the fear for some people, is that ownership. You want to hold on to 100% of your business, right? But think about it. Would you rather own 100% of a business that is worth 100 million, or hold, say, 55%, of a business that is worth 1 billion, right? So that growth potential of your business is capped because you have not registered your business. You have not put the kind of structure, that would attract the kind of investment that you desire to scale the business. The same thing goes for credit, right? You want to take a loan, the fact that you've registered your business projects a certain level of permanence, right? And that's what you want to do in business. You want to project a level of permanence. As a sole proprietorship, right, there is no Yeah, well, you can say as long as you're around, right, there is permanence, right? But if you're taken out of the equation, and we don't have permanence anymore, right? And banks do not want to deal with such entities, right? They want to deal with an entity where if the person, the face of the entity today, is no longer there, right, the business is still a going concern, right, and they can always get their money back. The same thing applies to investors, right? You want to be able to do that so that you can attract the required investment that would help you to scale your business. So another reason why you should put structure in place where your business is concerned, right, is the fact that people generally, when I say people now, I mean your potential client, right, have more confidence in a business that is properly structured, right? If you are the secretary and you are the one making the clothes, remember we're using the example of a fashion designer, right? And you are the one receiving customers at the reception, you are the one delivering the clothes to the people understand that kind of business, like I said before, may not be around for so long, right? So they don't have their certain kind of contracts that they're not going to give to you, right? First, because you simply don't have the capacity to deliver on that kind of contract, right? Imagine you have to make clothes for 1,000 people, and of course there are contracts like that, right? And you don't have the capacity to do that, and certainly nobody will even trust you, with that kind of project, right? And remember that what we're trying to do is help you increase the value, of your business, right? So it's important that you put some structure in place there. Then of course we can also talk about the business uplifting you, right? Because the business is not just for you. You want to have a business that can provide surplus value to the extent where you are able to help other people around you, family, friends. You're able to also impact your community, right? And there's also the psychological reward, for a business owner when your business grows beyond just being mom and pop. There's that recognition that you get, and it increases your influence generally, in society, and you're able to better impact society that way, right? So I said all of this to say, look, fight that smallness, right? And one of the ways to do that is to set a proper structure in place, right? So that your business has wings and it can fly, financially and otherwise, right? And the second thing I'm going to speak to is documentation, right? I cannot emphasize this enough, right? You think you're a small business and so you do everything verbally, right? Or informally, right? It is important that you document it, right? What documentation does, right, is that it leaves a trail, right? There's a history, that you can always go back to in the event, of any issue, right? One of the places where I see small businesses default, when it comes to documentation is contracting, right? And if you look at it really, what you call business to a lawyer is essentially a series of contracts, right? You enter into a contract with your suppliers, you enter into contract with your customers, you enter into contract with your staff, right? And so that's what business is about, right? And what's a contract is promise, promise made, promise kept, right? And then, some value exchange hand, in between, right? That's the name and definition, of that. And you must be able to document whatever business arrangement that you are getting into, right? I mean, there are people that are unscrupulous, right? And they want to take advantage of your business. Remember that this business is going to be a big business, right? This business is going to be a multi-million-dollar business, right? So you have to set the tone right from the very beginning. So you have scrupulous people, unscrupulous people rather, that get into business with you, and they want to cheat you, right? It's easier for them to do that if you don't have things documented, right? And when you want to do this, let me just, chip this in. You consult a lawyer, get a lawyer to do it for you, right? Don't be a chipstick, right? Get a lawyer to do these things for you. It doesn't cost much, I hope so, right? But, it is what the cost, if it does cost much, right? It is what the cost. So invest in this, right? Do a proper contract so that you have a point of reference, right? So if anything happens, somebody defaults on that contract, you can always go back, to sue them or look for other amicable ways, of resolving whatever issues you might have with them emanating from the contract. But that gives you a frame of reference. If you don't have that in place, then you have nothing to fall back on. Is your word against theirs, and you know how that can pan out, right? It's another area where I think you should also document, right, is when you have correspondence with your staff, right, with your clients, with investors, whoever it is that you are dealing with in the course of your business. It is important that you establish some, most big organizations would have emails and they do that. But I understand that for smaller organizations, right, this may not really be, realistic for you at the moment, right? But you can start small and grow big, right? So start with a letterhead, right? Do a proper letterhead. Don't just print something out of your computer, something that you designed by yourself, right? Just do a proper letterhead. It shows seriousness, right? It shows that you are in it for the long haul, right? And business people that your clients want to see that. Like I said before, potential investors, other people that you may want to collaborate, other stakeholders in your business, they want to see that. They want to see that they are dealing with a serious-minded person, right? And the thing about projection is that the way you present yourself is the way people treat you, right? So if you want to be taken seriously in business, right, you must project seriousness, right? And so that's another area I think you should get a proper after establishing correspondence. When you do anything, you have a meeting with a client, generate a memo and send same to the client, to capture what you've discussed. Another thing is there's a humane part of business interaction or communication, that I'd like to emphasize here, especially for small businesses. And this applies to whether you're small or you're big, really, it doesn't matter. And this is the fact that when something happens, when your client is celebrating something, right, they've just been appointed as something, remember that relationships matter a lot. Relationships will bring for you what money cannot buy, right? And so you must be deliberate about communicating. If they are bereaved, if they suffer loss, write a letter of condolence. If they enjoy a blessing, write a congratulatory note, write something and show that you always write. There's something we say in law, right, that if it is not written, then it never happened, right? If it is not written, it never happened. Back to the issue of contract, there are even people who are not even trying to cheat you. There are good people there, but issues come up. And I know that, you will say, maybe God forbid, because you're a believer, right? But hey, it's business, right? Things happen that are unforeseen, right? And what the contract does is that it protects you in the event of such, occurrences, right? You didn't anticipate this, you didn't. For instance, I give you a very good example. COVID happened, in 2020. Nobody saw that coming, right? And if you are in business with somebody and that happened, as a matter of fact, it wasn't even what we call in law a force majeure event, in most contracts, right? Essentially, a force majeure event is something that the occurrence of which basically entitles you to either suspend for a while, the performance of that contract, or to terminate the contract, altogether, right? And so COVID happened. Even if you were a good person in that kind of situation, right, you had planned to honor the terms of the contract, you didn't have control over such externality. So even if you're a good person and your intention was to honor the terms of that contract, there was nothing you could have done, about the occurrence of COVID. And so you'd have been in a position where you're left helpless, right? Now imagine that you didn't have a contract in that kind of, scenario, right? There's no telling what can happen. You might lose money. You might, there's a lot that could possibly come out of that, right? So this is why it is very important, that you document. Don't download. Let me just speak to. Don't download template on the internet. I just fill it with what you think is required, right? Consult a lawyer, right? And so for business owners, of course, there are many other things that the law allows you to do, right, as a business. But I think this is where I want to, focus on today. The fact that first, formalization or registration of your business, putting a structure, around your business helps you to increase the value, right, of your business, both in terms of your capacity to attract, revenue, and also in terms of your contracting, your investor confidence, customer confidence, all the things that's spoken about earlier. And then the second part, which is documentation, that it helps you to avoid legal exposures, right? It helps you to avoid legal exposure. So that is where we'll leave it for now for business owners. And then quickly, I'm going to speak to creatives. I understand that, these people occupy a major portion of the population, especially in our generation, right? A lot of people doing stuff on the internet, using their minds, to create amazing things, both in entertainment and every other field, right? And I think that it is very important, for you to understand what protection the law offers you, as a creative person, right? So that you are able to exploit to your own benefit, right, the fruit of your mental labors, right? So that somebody else is not just exploiting what you have labored for, right? And so I'm going to speak specifically to IP right. But let me quickly backtrack a bit. When it comes to IP right, this doesn't just apply to creatives, it applies to everybody, right? So let's go back to, I'll give you an interesting analogy, right? Let's say that you have two businesses, right? Both of them fashion outfits. Let's call the first one Taylor Lucio. I'll explain what that is, right? I'm sure some of you are already guessing, right? And then let's call the second one Obayo made, right? That just means Obioma made it, right? But you get the point. And so these two entities, right? One is registered, like we had talked about earlier, has all the structure in place, and then also has its IP rights, right? Fully protected, right? Before I go into that, let me explain what IP rights are. Essentially, IP rights are the exclusive rights that the law confers on the creator of either an artistic work or a literary work, or a musical work or an inventive work, right? So the law confers some protection. The law ensures that you have exclusive ownership of that particular work, and you are also able to exploit it to your own benefit to the exclusion of others. Of course, saving instances where the law allows, some form of not really exploitation use, right, without recourse to you, but that's not our focus today, right? And so if you have your IP right protected, let me give you an example. So let's say that Taylor Lucio, for instance, has the trademark registered, right? So that is protected, right? Other business processes. So when I say trademark, the trademark is essentially, it could either be a service mark, which means the name, of that very name Taylor Lucio, or the logo, right? If you check most clothes, you'll find, some kind of logo. We call it device in law, right? That is attached to it. And essentially the protection of that, which comes by registration, right? You can register your trademark, in Nigeria and in other countries, right? Okay, so for example, let's say that somebody's about to invest in the company, right? Whether it is equity they want to acquire, in other words, they want to own a particular percentage of the company, right? Or they want to even buy the company altogether, right? It's one of the fastest ways to, make a killing business. You grow a company from the scratch and then you sell it off, for good money, right? One of the things that would happen, a major distinguishing factor between Taylor Lucio and Obayo in this instance will be the registration of their IP rights, right? IP rights are intangible rights, right? But they actually have quantifiable value in monetary terms, right? Which means that when you're buying a company, one of the things you consider is the intellectual property rights that are in the possession or in the ownership or that are owned rather by that company, right? So these things are valued, right? And then they are sold as part of the company. So it means that it increases the value significantly, right, of that company. And I'll tell you how this works for creatives. I'll give you a very good example. There's this popular television game show that we all know. It's called Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, right? And this is a television game show that airs in about, last I checked, about 160 countries, of the world. Imagine that, right? Now, this television game show was actually the brainchild of three gentlemen, right? David Briggs, Mike Whitehall, and Stephen Knight, right? And they started this in 1998, right? And I mean, this was their brainchild, right? And I can tell you for a fact that they ensure that intellectual property, in that game show, right, is protected. Now, think about it. You can get an idea, even here in Nigeria, for a television game show, right? It is not that out of this world, right? Anybody can come up with a television game show, pardon me, right? But if you don't protect your rights in that television game show, right, then you may not be able to do what these three gentlemen did, right, in 2008, right, when Sony Pictures acquired the rights to the game show. Let me shock you right now. As in 2008, when Sony Pictures acquired this right, they had to pay £137.5 million, right, to get this right from the company that held it. Of course, the company created a franchise. A young man by the name of Paul Smith, got the idea to create a franchise out of this television game show, and that's why today we have our own variant in Nigeria and many other countries, India and the rest of the world. They equally have this. How did he do that? The power of franchising. So one of the benefits of protecting your intellectual property right is the fact that you are able to extract value, right, from that business, even whilst operating the business. I'll explain what I mean by that, right? So for instance, remember the example of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire that I shared earlier, right? So it could be anything. It could be, for instance, let's say an E13, right? And some of these franchises are available here in Nigeria, right? And you get that idea. The idea of franchising is that you give somebody, right, a franchisee, access to your business model, your trademark, and other get-up of your business. And they are able to replicate that wherever they are, right? So typically, you have a defined territory where that operates, right? So it could be a country, it could be, a state, it depends on the terms of the franchise, right? So you can have a business model that works, right? And you don't have to replicate it by yourself in several other places, right? You can license that business model and the trademark and the goodwill that you have in that business really to someone else, and they can take that and begin, to use that. Typically you get what we call a startup fee, right? That comes to you initially. And then there's also the licensing, typically an annual licensing fee that you get every year, right? So you're making money from your established business model and trademark without even lifting a finger, except of course the finger that you're lifting, to sign the contract, right? And so this is very important. And it goes back to the issue of protecting your IP, right? So you don't take these things for granted. You may be small today, but remember, you don't plan to remain small the rest of your business life, right? Or the rest of your creative life. So it is important that you take the steps to protect your business. And so the point here is that the protection of intellectual property significantly increases, right, the value of your business, right? So the trademark, if it's an audio work, you talk about things like copyright, or if it's a literary work, right, you talk about things like copyright. So it is important. Of course, these rights are automatic rights, right? So the moment you create the work, right, it starts to enjoy IP protection, right? If it's copyright, if it's let's say for instance a song, right, or it could even be audio visuals, right? I mean, this is the internet age. People create content and then they put it up on social media platforms and YouTube channels and whatever right? And you can generate money from that, right? And the law is even better now. That's Nigerian law, where it actually allows you to protect your right, your copyright in respect of these works. For instance, where somebody has, without your permission, uploaded your work on a particular platform, and then it's getting a lot of traction, right? You can write to the platform owner, right, and tell them to take it down, right? And so this is some of the protection that it offers you. This is in addition to the exclusive right, to exploit that work and also to be recognized as the creator of that work. The same goes for, patents. I mean, these are scientific inventions, really, right? And industrial designs that are created, by creative people that we have. So it's important. Another factor that I would like to, or another element, of IP protection that I'd like to touch on, particularly for creative, is the use of NDAs, non-disclosure agreement. Sometimes you are getting into a project, right, and you've not finalized, the terms of the project yet. Maybe the person is just checking out what you have to offer, and you just go there and you share your ideas, everything, ho-ha, like we say, right, and without any form of contractual arrangement to protect whatever information you are giving in that context. Remember, you don't have like a proper contract just yet, right? The person hasn't agreed to get into that project with you. They are only checking out what you have to offer, right? But you must protect this. We've seen cases of this before, where people divulge. A friend of mine was even talking to me about an instance where she had gone for an interview, right? And in the course of the interview, of course, they had asked her to do some work, and she did, right? They didn't get back to her eventually, or maybe they did with, a letter of regret, like we call it, right? But a few weeks down the line, she started seeing posters, from that organizations that actually used the ideas, right? They had used the ideas on some of these posters and all of that. And of course, that's a bit dicey because it's an interview, right? It's difficult to really protect what you offer, right, at that level. But generally speaking, when you get into a project with people, sign an NDA, right, so that they're not able to use your ideas in the event that they don't get into the project with you. I'll quickly backtrack a bit. There's something I should have mentioned earlier, and this is with respect to documentation. Another aspect of documentation that I need to emphasize, right, is financials, right, especially for small businesses. There are a lot of opportunities out there, government grants, there are finance institutions, government-owned finance institutions, for instance, like Bank of Industry in Nigeria, right, that, give soft loans, lots of loans to, businesses. Small businesses are targeted. So small and medium-sized businesses are typically targeted, by these institutions, right? But one fundamental requirement that they typically would ask for, right, is your financials, right? So, and that is why, I spoke to documentation earlier, right, to document these things, right? Simple profit and loss account, you should have to present, when such opportunities come, right? And also there are grants, that are given to small businesses, right, that can help you to grow your business. It's additional source of capital for you. So these grants are essentially aimed at helping small businesses to, scale, right? But if you don't have your financials in place, you don't have your books intact, right, then, you're not able to take advantage of some of these opportunities. Another one I should quickly mention, even real property, right? I talked about intellectual property earlier, right? Even real property. So you have, for instance, a land, and this applies to individuals as it does to businesses, right? You cannot unlock the capital, right? The monetary value in that asset, right? That physical asset, if it's not properly registered. So you have a land, right, but you've not perfected your title to that land, right? In other words, your land is not registered. The government doesn't know that you are the owner, of this property. You can use that land, for instance, as a collateral in the bank to get money to expand your business, right? So it's important that you do this with both real properties and intellectual property. So, but let me emphasize that point again, that it is very, very important that you have your books in all that. I've seen this, especially young people. There's a capital glut, right? There is money that is looking for outlets. People are looking for places to invest their money to generate surplus value, right? But if you don't put your house in order, if your business is not properly documented, like I've been saying, throughout the course of this presentation, right, then you're not able to take advantage of these opportunities. So let's quickly do a recap of what we've learned today. The first thing is, in order for you to multiply the resources available to you in your business, you have to create a proper structure around your business, which of course starts with registering your business. Also, I talked about documentation, contracting, right, at every level. And lastly, I believe I spoke to how you can tap into the power of intellectual property, right, to increase the value of your business, right? What I hope and what I desire, where your business is concerned, is that it grows from that small entity that is doing, a couple thousands of naira or dollars, as the case may be, into a multi-million-dollar business, right? And this can happen, however small you are today, this can happen for you, but there are certain processes that you have to put in place for this to happen. Of course, there are many more things to discuss, on this, but I think we'll leave it here for now, right? So quickly, let's take our creed as we bring this to a close. Can you raise your hand? As sure as God helps me, I will not give up, I will not cave in, I will not quit, I will not fear, I will not fail, I will not die until my job is done and victory is won. I am the new, and I love this church. I want to wish you a beautiful week ahead. Have a productive, have a great week ahead. Goodbye for now.